So again, welcome. I'm Katie Porter. I'm a poet. I am an essayist, and I am also executive director of Inlandia Institute. And we're a literary nonprofit, but tonight I have my writer hat on, and I'd like to let our guests introduce themselves. So we'll go around the room. Joe, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. So hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Thanks to Katie for wrangling us together. I write literary nonfiction for the most part, although I started in academic writing and poetry. I brought a copy of my book. So this is my book from Pelecanesis. It's called Mass, A Sniper, a Father, and a Priest. It was published in 2019. I'm a big believer in the small press. Mark was amazing. And my first book also was published with a small press, a really old small press called Ant Loot that's based in San Francisco.
Great. How about Alan?
Hi, my name is Alan Kalachi. I did some blogging for Huffington Post and other things like that. And then I've written on both Pelecanesis and Bamboo Dart. I did Heart Like a Starfish, a memoir about my heart transplant. That was my first publication on Pelecanesis. And then I recently, about a year ago or so, put out 17 in Life, a remembrance about a student who I went to junior high with who was brutally murdered by her jealous boyfriend.
Thank you, Alan. Sean?
Hey everybody, thanks for being here. Again, echoing thanks to Katie for organizing this. So I write fiction. I've been fortunate enough to have a couple books put out by Pelecanesis. So the first one was a novel called Stumbling Out the Stable. And the second one was a much different direction. It's the collection of microfiction with no story being longer than 50 words, called Hold Still Fast, which really excited about both, but really excited about, your more recent one always. And for a day job, I work in public information and communications for a government agency in Riverside County.
Great. Welcome, Juanita.
Hi, everybody. I'm Juanita E. Nance. I have my book, Portrait of a Deputy Public Defender, How I Became a Punk Rock Lawyer, because I'm a public defender in Riverside, as well as a writer. And I published that with Bamboo Dart, and Mark and Dennis were amazing. And they really made it so seamless and beautiful. And what we'll talk about later about the benefits of working with the small press. I also have a book called Tales of an Inland Empire Girl that I just released with another small press, Los Nietos, which is out of LA, Frank Kearns. So I'm all about the small presses.
Cool. How about you, Romaine?
Hi, everyone. I'm Romaine Washington, and I have a little bit of experience with being published by two small presses. The first one is with Jammy Publishing, my first book, Sirens in Her Belly. And my most recent one is Purgatory Has an Address, and that's with Bamboo Dart Press. I'm an educator and have been for, feels like, all my life. So I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Romaine. And how about you, Tim?
Hi, everyone. And thanks to everyone for showing up for this. My name's Tim Hatch. I write poetry, I write memoir, I write lots of stuff. I'm a writer of stuff. And I teach at Cal State San Bernardino, RCC, various other places. My book, which the name of which I'm forgetting, my book Wild Embrace is my first collection of poetry, and it was published by Bamboo Dart Press. I don't have a copy of it nearby because I score about a 4 out of 10 on professionalism and preparedness. And then I also have a series of ebooks published by Pelecanesis. And both of those experiences have been awesome. That's about everything, I think.
So, I think we all have had very positive experiences so far with Pelecanesis and Bamboo Dart, and Mark and Dennis. Mark Givens is the editor, and Dennis Kalachi is the art director, I believe. I'm not sure how the duties are distributed exactly, but they're a team. But I thought, we could talk a little bit about what defines a small press. I think for some of us, a small press means something different. Anybody want to chime in? Yeah, Tim?
I mean, these days, I used to think of a small press as an academic press or a vanity press. And that's changed so drastically in the last 10, 15 years. I would think of a small press as any organization concerned about aesthetic and art over profit. I suppose it's possible there's a gigantic press out there who's concerned about those things. Feel free to prove me wrong and point me to their website. I think of small press as concerned more with the art form of book publishing, the quality of the book being published, whether it's fiction or nonfiction or poetry or whatever.
I want to add on to that. I love that you said aesthetic and art, but I also want to add agency onto that, because some small presses have a particular vision in mind. And I think of Jammy Publishing, who's really rooted in community, and some have just a mission for a particular group or community, and making sure that they have a voice that otherwise wouldn't fit into the wider frame of things to be published. So that's a third wheel to that, I think. That's really nice. Aesthetic, art, yeah, and agency.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I could compare it to with like almost like music, where you have the major label, then you have the indie label. The person, I think small press provides voices and ideas and expressions that need to be heard and should be heard, but some major, bigger presses or whatever might be reluctant to go down those avenues.
Yeah, I think about the small press kind of synthesizing what I'm hearing here too is like an on-ramp, for those texts that might be more experimental, or they don't fit quite into a perfect, the corporate box, right, Tim? It needs to be this many words and no more. It needs to stay at this range of vocabulary and no more, unless you have an agent who is your, hustling for you. And so it allows more room, like what both Alan and Romain are talking about, more room for experimentation. And also, I really appreciate that the small press, they pick your book because they love it. So they're going to hustle for you and try to build those bridges for you in the communities to sell your book.
Yeah, and picking up on what Joe said, I think it's the regional nature too. A press like Bamboo Dart is very focused on California mostly, not solely. They have some New York authors and stuff like that. And then a press like Los Nietos and Jammy, they're focused on Southern California as well. So I think it's that regional nature of it. And then the editorial help that you get in a small press, I think is really important. And the support you get, that they'll wait for you or they'll push you, whatever you need. It's not going to be this corporate mentality where it's you have this deadline and you're going to hit it. I think it's a little different.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, well, one of the main defining differences for me is like that, the profit motive. The bigger presses expect that you are going to earn money for them. It becomes about, commercial. Is your book going to sell enough copies to warrant them investing in you? And it's not solely about, is it good enough? Is it innovative? Is it interesting? It becomes, about the dollars.
And
I also,
trends. I think trends are, just like fashion and cars, publishing has trends, and except when you're with a small press, it's more about community doesn't actually, community is solid and trends might dance around it, but at the core, they have a mission, and so it allows for continuity of vision and spacing and inclusivity that you wouldn't find with a large press when you're looking at profit and trends. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think something for me that comes to mind when I think about small presses, and I'm going to say this in a couple of ways, would be numbers. And numbers being typically a small staff, but numbers in a really cool, exciting way where I feel like there is more. And I've seen this with the press that I'm with right now with Pelicanesis, that again, really happy to be there. And like, I don't think I would have found homes for my books otherwise. And when I talk about numbers, like my last collection of stories was, no story was more than 50 words. I don't know that that's super marketable to like a big house. And I don't think that like that's something that would probably get much attention in that regard. I mean, it did have sort of experimental quality by that because every story had to be limited by that word count. And to that end, like I'll see every range of book put out by not only Pelicanesis, but other presses as well. I mean, one of my very favorite books of all time, like it might be my very favorite. I just don't know. It's hard to pick a favorite book, but it's at least top 2 would be The Space Poet by Samantha Edmond out of Split Lip Press. And that's like 46 pages.
Wow, yeah.
And it's like this experimental hybrid poetry narrative work / journal entry. And I've never read anything like it. And I'm so in love with it. And I'm just so grateful that a press put that out that I can read that.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't have been published likely by a larger press. I
I
mean,
don't think so. I don't think it has enough pages. I mean, that's the other thing. There's an investment in pages, right? So, a larger press has to spend like that sweet spot. Maybe a book is too many pages. I've heard about this. Like, well, it's too many pages or not enough pages. And then you're outside that range where, the product doesn't quite fit neatly into the profit you're trying to make. So I think numbers matter in a way.
Yes.
From pages to people.
Yeah, pages to people.
Yeah.
yeah, well, and the more salaries you have to pay, the more important it becomes that you are profitable, and therefore, that's the focus of a commercial press. And then the other side of this coin might be self-publishing, which has, the word that comes to mind in all of this is control. Authors who wish to have the most control over the output often go the self-published route. And there's all the tools are out there now. And I think that there's less of a dividing line between being self-published and a small press. That's more of a blurred line between that than versus a small press and a large commercial press. I mean, but it is on a gradient. I can see you thinking, No,
I'm just thinking about, why. So an interesting question that comes out of that is why didn't anybody on this panel decide to self-publish their work? Because even though a small press is small, it's plugged into a community, you're working with someone, you're helping to build something. And I think often people think that, so you read one story about someone who self-publishes and someone picks it up and then it has another life. And they make a lot of money out of that. And again, it's kind of following the wrong thing, but I digress.
Yeah.
The issue of who's going to help you, because even with the small press, you're going to be very much a collaborator in the publicity and in the carrying the books to the thing, and and we've all done that. And in the marketing and sharing of lists and stuff, but you're totally by yourself unless you hire a publicist or hire a whatever marketer, and that's expensive, especially if they don't know books. So I just wanted to throw that in there too.
I think that's some of the pros and cons, though. It depends on, like, we all have a good experience with Bamboo Dark Press, but I've had friends that have been published by small presses. I'm not going to give any names, but where they helped a little bit with the product, and they had a finished product, and then that was it. And they didn't help with the marketing and the community, effort in getting things. So it all depends, because you have micro and then you have small. And so the ability, the number of people on staff and the ability to, get involved and get things out there, that can be a challenge. So, if anybody's listening and they're saying, oh, small press sounds perfect, this is exactly what I want to do. You have to have that conversation and know to have that conversation before you take that walk with your small press publisher.
I will add on to that. I've only published with Bamboo Dart and Pelicanesis, but friends with a lot of writers. And I have several friends who've had really bad experiences, or maybe not terrible experiences, but incredibly frustrating and disheartening experiences. And I'm thinking of one friend in particular whose book, again, not naming names, but whose book was picked up by a small press out of Los Angeles, and she was over the moon. And they thought enough of her writing that they wanted to publish her work. And then they got the book proofed and all that, and then told her, yeah, you need to drum up 100 pre-orders.
Yes, that's
or
right.
It's not being released.
Right.
So where do you, and how much can you do when you're a new author starting out? How much can you do? And
I've heard of that too.
The whatever the balance is, if you want your book out, then you're probably finding a credit card.
Yeah.
And that to my eyes is, I don't know, one step short of a scam.
Yes,
No.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And actually, that's
it's
kind of common too.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that, I have a great experience with books presses, but I've went out of my way to kind of market myself.
Yes.
And I think you have to be prepared to do that if you're with a small press. For everyone listening, be prepared to make your little flyers yourself. Be prepared to call a library cold. Be prepared to call Barnes and Noble cold. I do a lot of Guerrilla stuff. I'll just go to a bookstore.
You are like the master of self-promotion, Jen.
Yes.
I just want to say, you are inspiring, and I still want to have coffee with you and pick your brain.
But I also try to give back, right? I created my
You do.
podcast so I can bring other writers and promote the books I love so much that are the majority, are, I think 99% of the people I have on are with small presses. And I think people emphasize using podcasts nowadays to market their books, because that's the wave of the future, is just marketing on different podcasts.
Yeah, and as a librarian, I will tell everybody, do not be afraid to approach librarians. And if you do, there's ways to go about it. April is National Poetry Month. November is NaNoWriMo, which is Write Your Own Novel Month, basically. And a lot of libraries do programs or want to do programs. And I always think it's good, too, to have a fellow support group of writers where it's not just you at an event. You have 3 or 4. I've done many events pre-COVID at our library. We had some fantastic authors, including Tim and Sean. And I think that's a great way to get your stuff out there, too. And librarians, we're very nice. We're very easy to work with and supportive.
Agreed.
Find your group, the people who support you, whoever they are.
There's a thing in the chat. Are you looking at that?
Well, let's get to that toward the end. Let's do some, so folks who have questions, so that they don't get lost, if you wouldn't mind, put them in the Q&A box. And that way we can see, and we will, for the last 15 minutes or so, we'll go over those questions.
Can I just want to say one more thing just on this
please.
subject. I don't know if we've totally transitioned, but just in that caveat thing, I will not share my details, but I had a similar kind of weird experience to what Tim was describing with another small press that I really respected. Also was a personal relationship. And you have to be really thoughtful about these things. And sometimes you you are trusting on a certain kind of personal level, and you are letting other kind of questions go. So you're not necessarily talking about these ideas about timeline and what exactly is our contract and those things, because you have a sense of, well, I know this person, I can see their track record, we have an understanding.
Yeah.
You just be careful about those things, because that can break your heart.
Yeah.
But then there's Mark. So, so anyway, that's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, I think we've all got stories. And I think that if you're going to self-publish, or if you're going to go with a small press, if you're self-publishing, be aware of those kinds of scams and those packages where they want to sell you everything, and for $6,000 we'll do this. And the thing about going with a small press is you do still have that almost that level of control. But they can save you from yourself. I've seen a lot of self-published books that have typos on the cover. And it's really sad because it's not reflecting on the content. The content might be great, but if you don't proofread, you need to have a team.
Yes.
Yes.
But you also, if you're going with a small press, you need to ask those questions and don't be afraid to push back. I mean, I'm going to do this for a second, which is, 3 full-length books, 3 chapbooks with a very small press that don't have ISBNs, but they are small feminist press. A chapbook, my very first one, from a press that is now out of business. I also won't say which, but at least one of these books did have that pre-order requirement. And I said no. And they didn't like me. And they told me that my print run would be shorter and that I wasn't supposed to talk about it. So, yeah, but I said no.
Good for you.
Good for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's okay to say no to these presses if
Yes.
it doesn't fit you,
I think
Yeah.
it's also a good idea to contact, if like you want to work with a small press, maybe find an author who's published with them and contact them.
And
Yeah.
don't be afraid to ask
Yeah.
questions or to push back a little against what they ask you to do. It's okay. You need to be your own advocate and not, I'll say too, one of these books here, the press, they publish a lot of books. They have a lot of imprints. I know a lot of fine writers who've been published with them.
Yeah.
But they make you do your own layout.
What?
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yes, which is not fun. I mean, it's not professional. So there are levels of professionalism within every tier of publishing. So
I can't even imagine doing my own layout.
Yeah,
and
that's what I'm thinking too.
I'm familiar with some of the software and I can't imagine doing it.
Mine would be Traco, like crooked.
yeah, that's a longer conversation, but it's not in the software that you would expect it to be in. So, but at that point, you've already signed the contract and you're excited and you want the book, and it's okay. You make decisions and you do these things. So that's my personal experience with publishing. It runs the gamut. But I feel like I've been lucky to be able to choose my own covers. I choose the art for my covers. The very first book, that chapbook that's now out of print, I had chosen the cover, but my publisher decided she didn't like it and she traded it out for something else. So you just have to ask questions. And yeah.
And speaking of covers, go ahead, Romaine, sorry.
I was just going to say that I like that she talked about it being a feminist press, because there are certain, women have a harder time breaking into the publishing world. People of color, Indigenous people, there's a whole, and that's another beautiful thing, can be, because it sounds like in that situation, it wasn't optimal, but it can be a beautiful thing where they have a particular focus group that they're working with, that they want to give voice to. But even with that, and you might get excited and you might say, here's a place for, they have the same vision that I have, and I'm part of that, but you still have to be aware of how you're communicating and what is included in the publishing process. So that's, having that feminist press experience that you talked about.
Yeah, well, and there are reasons why you might choose a press that go beyond how much money you think you can make. It's because you like their vision. It's because you believe in their mission.
Yeah.
But do ask, I think I need to let everybody else talk, but I think one big red flag is if they ask you for money. If they ask you for money, then you need to look the other, turn around, run the other way.
This is the last thing I have a friend who just last year, she said, oh, this publisher contacted me and they want to publish my book, but they want such and such amount of money. And I said, that doesn't make sense. I said, that's like saying I'm a singer and somebody said they have a venue for me and I just have to pay $500 to be able to go sing at their venue. But she wanted to be published so badly that she couldn't hear that wasn't the way it should go.
And that's how they prey on, I think, young writers.
Well, writers of every age. I've seen it across the age spectrum.
It reminds me of the pay-to-play thing from the 90s in the clubs in LA.
Yeah.
I am going to apologize, but I do have to bow out. I have to go to the airport and pick up a family member. So
but that's okay.
Thank you for organizing this, and thank you again to everybody for showing up.
Thank you.
We're not done. Tim's taking off, but we're
Take
still
care,
here.
everybody.
Stick around.
Bye,
Take
Tim.
care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Katie, I just wanted to say really quick about contracts. As a lawyer, I would tell everyone, get your contract reviewed, either by a lawyer or a paralegal or a friend. There's artist agencies that will review your contract. Do not sign away your rights unless you absolutely have to. I mean, I think we're so eager to get published that it's like, I'll sign on the dotted line. I did that with one of my first stories. Thank goodness it was an infertility story. And thank goodness that I crossed out a bunch of stuff on the contract, because they later went bankrupt and sold to Lifetime, and Lifetime would have owned my fertility story.
Wow.
That's how broad the first contract was.
Yeah.
And I narrowed it down because I'm a lawyer and I was able to do that. But I mean, I can't even imagine. It was XO Jane. They went bankrupt and the subsidiary, they sold off to the conglomerate, Lifetime.
Yeah.
Not that they would enforce it, but who knows, right?
You don't know. And so I think we're talking about our personal experiences with publishing. I know, Joe, you've had your own kind of mixed experiences, but has anybody else had anything that they'd like to share about their journey?
Just really quick, my memoir, the first press that looked at it, she gave me a free evaluation of it, but she wanted me to rewrite it as fiction in young adult voice, starting in high school without any of the adult stuff, just first person young adult narrator in high school, and tell the dropout story that way, which wasn't a bad idea, but it wasn't the book I wanted, but it was one of my favorite presses. And I just said, you know what, this doesn't work for me. I'm not going to rewrite a whole book I've spent 10 years on,
And I think what Juanita says, don't be afraid to walk away.
Yes.
Amen to that.
Do you ever think, I know you have your memoir now, when you said that, I thought, oh, that would be kind of interesting to read it from that perspective. Having your memoir and then having the YA, have you thought about that since, or?
Yeah, I'm going to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll do it, but this had to get done first, because this was 15 years, at the point I was talking to this press, it was 10 years in. And I was like, I really don't envision rewriting this whole thing and throwing away the version I have that I love, and I had to start with my dad's death and flashback. It's just the way I always saw it. So I don't know. But yeah, I mean, she gave me this great idea, and she gave me 5 pages of notes that she did for free.
Wow.
Yeah, it was nice.
Huh,
She was fantastic.
interesting.
So, what are the upsides of publishing with a small press? I mean, we've talked about the mixed experiences, but
I can talk a bit about my experience. One of the things I'm most grateful for with my small press experience is access. So we've already talked about Mark. He's a very involved publisher. So it's not certainly a lot more than publishing. There's also editing and a very detailed and caring editing perspective. So on my novel, Stumbling Out the Stable, there's a character who really gained so much dimension from Mark's edits, and he saw aspects of her that could have been expanded, and certain details, character aspects that could have been really drawn out. And I ended up with a way better character, and she was an important character. I'd say that she was, maybe not the main, not, maybe one of the top two main characters. She was like maybe the third main character, really pivotal person in the story. And it became a much better book because she was a much better character. So that was really important to me. And then also, yeah, I mean, I like having, you do have a lot of say in where this goes, but I also like somebody giving me a really honest opinion and giving perspective. I just think, what I get to do is way better with help, and having somebody vet something than if I just struck out on my own, never mind the typos and stuff. And one other thing I'll add that's really cool is, I've gotten to have like a lot of say in like the aesthetics of the book in terms of how it looks. But then on the first book, like, so there's like the satirical take about these like overthinking college kids, or one in particular, and he's like, it's a satirical kind of make fun of this liberal arts head in the clouds type student. So I wanted to have like this old statue, not the Rodin thinking man, but like a prehistoric thinking man. And it was kind of heady, but I'm like, I showed Mark a picture. And then he went and he built me the thinking man replica of that statue out of clay.
Wow.
Mark's also an artist. And like,
Love
well,
it.
I also kind of want this like colorful thing. Can he sit on like some colorful background? It's like, yeah. And he did that. So
Oh, my goodness.
I got to have all this
Yeah.
input, but then he even made it down to the point of making a sculpture. So I
That's
don't,
amazing.
I can't promise that for other small presses. So if other people are interested in small presses, I'm not you can make statues for you. But
Yeah.
that's pretty rad.
Yeah.
Pretty psyched with my experience personally. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I just want to second, in terms of working with Mark specifically, he is incredibly meticulous reader. And, my book had a ton of notes, and we had all these conversations about how to do the notes, how to manage them so that they wouldn't intrude into the literary part of the text, but also they needed to be there. And oh my goodness. So just imagine, like this is not the fun part of the edit, where you're actually looking at format and then are the numbers wrong and how come this is twice and stuff like that. And he just, he wants the book to be good. He wants it to work, but he understands what you're trying to do, and he wants to make it happen. And so it just, he was wonderful to work with on design too. It's kind of like, I'm thinking this, how could we do that? And but he read the book, I felt like, I think all of us probably here would nod to that Mark didn't just kind of go, yeah, sounds good, I'll edit it. Like, you really tried to get his head around what it was. I think that all of us were doing, and I really appreciated that.
Absolutely. I will second that. And it was wonderful to have, should this period be there or should it not be? The discussions about that just really, it made me look at things a little closer and bump it up. And it was really wonderful to have that. And it was a quick exchange too. It wasn't like, I'm going to ask this question and maybe a week or so later I'll hear something. It was almost, it was like you're working on it with your friend and what do you think? Yes. And so that, and having that feedback and getting to take it to the next level and knowing that it was really looked at closely, and those conversations were key. A great experience.
Yeah. Having somebody as vested in your book as you are
Yes.
is just the best.
Yeah.
Mark is magic. And then Dennis with the covers, I wanted to mention.
Yes.
They have the most beautiful covers, and you work with Mark and Dennis hand in hand on this stuff. And there was so much back and forth, and it was like working on an album cover almost, is how I felt. Like, it was amazing. It was cool.
And then for me with the cover, oh and having my son be able to have, you know, the cover on there, that just really, that's next level. So,
Yeah.
Hold it up
and-
again, Romaine. Hold up the cover again.
oh, let's see, I have to always have to do it with, let me take off my virtual background
Oh,
so you can
Okay,
see.
yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you can see it. Yeah, so this
So
is,
beautiful.
and yeah,
Yeah.
and so there was a reading in WeHo, and a person had the book on their back shelf. I was like, I took his picture, I said, hey, look, your artwork is being displayed in West Hollywood here. So, but that invitation to say, do you have a vision for your cover? Is there something you want us to consider? And that was, yeah, that was priceless. So,
Absolutely. I think, you know, when you are shopping a manuscript around, you have to ask, you know, questions, and you have to find somebody who is, as you said, Alan, who is as and invested in your work as you are, or, you know, who comes close, somebody who is going to treat it with care. There are all kinds of publishing models, and there is no right way and there is no wrong way. We all have to make our own individual decisions about how to do it. But I think, especially for newer writers, it's harder to advocate for ourselves. I think about, you know, what kind of advice would we give to somebody who was looking for a small press or shopping a manuscript around? And, you know, that would be my advice is don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to push back. Don't be afraid to walk away. What else might you say?
I also think I feel like I'm hogging up a lot of time. I don't know.
Oh,
I think that the first question you want to ask yourself really is, why do you want to have a book? You know, a lot of people, they start writing and they automatically jump to the book. And, you know, the book doesn't, it's like, you know, music, if you have a record you put out, it doesn't change your world. It doesn't, you're still a writer, you're still a musician. You have this wonderful package, hopefully, if everything's gone the way you want it to go. But what are your expectations on having your words in print? Where do you imagine it will take you? What doors do you imagine it's going to open for you, and how? So, and those are questions I didn't ask myself. You know, I've been writing forever and it just seemed like the next logical step. But looking back, now that, you know, I have a second book, what is it that, you know, I wanted to have happen? So going on to my third book, you know, when I do another book, that's definitely something that I'm going to be asking myself as I collect things, whether they're stories or it's a novel that I gear. Why do I want to present this to the world? And what do I hope, who's going to benefit, and why should it be there? Is it, and when is it going to be ready? Sometimes we're excited to have that happen, but, and really, maybe it is going to be another 15 years or 10 years. I just talked with a friend who, she's like, oh, I've been working on this for 10 years and I got feedback that it's not ready and it needs 3 more years. And I thought, or the work that was told to me, it's going to take 3 more years. And I started in the back of my mind, it's like, okay. And if it does, because we know, this last thing I'm going to say, when it comes to, what's the name of that book? It has Scout and Atticus.
oh, yeah, To Kill a Mockingbird.
To Kill a Mockingbird, her first book, they told her Scout was grown in her first book. And they said, tell it from. And so she went back and did it. What if she didn't? It wouldn't have been what we have now. And then when that other book was released, it didn't have the acclaim that, you know, To Kill a Mockingbird had. So it's okay if it takes 10 years or 15 or 20.
It is.
Yeah.
And I would say, as a writer of color, trust your voice. Don't let people discount you. Don't listen. I've had so many supporters and mentors, Joe, Stephanie, Romaine, Katie, people in my life that have brought me up. And
Yes.
I needed people to tell me I was good and that it was okay. I never thought my voice had value till maybe a couple years ago. And I would just say, if you think you're like, do whatever therapy or meditation you need, but get that self-confidence, because some of us played it well, but inside we're not confident, or else we would have put the book out, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But imagine putting the book out, and if I had the self-confidence to know that I'm going to give it 2 more years, because that takes self-confidence too, to hold back and to continue
Right.
working.
Right.
To get and what you might have in those 2 more years, as opposed to stopping yourself there. So
Yeah,
That's true.
sometimes a little extra is okay.
I
You know,
agree.
it's a balance, you know, depending on your journey, but you know.
No,
Yeah.
but it's done when it's done. Sometimes it needs 15 years to marinate. My mother's character changed so much over the years. And I probably may not have a relationship with my mom still if I had published the first draft, you know?
Right. My other advice would be to do your research and homework. See what small press you're sending your manuscripts to and why that press. Did you read other titles? Have you reached out to some of the authors like Tim mentioned earlier?
Yeah.
Pretend that you're a kitten or a puppy. You want to find it a proper home.
Oh, I like that. That was nice.
Thanks.
There's also another side to this discussion, in that you don't want to be overconfident and send your manuscript out without having revised it to, you know, a completion. I think a lot of younger or newer writers, not talking about age, but just about experience levels, that you write it and that speaks to what Romaine was saying. You write it and you go, okay, and now I want to publish a book. I want to publish it. Well, it probably could benefit from a few more rounds of revision. Or if you do go, you know, the self-publishing route, because that's the route for you, it's about the level of professionalism. Proofread it, have somebody help you line edit it. Don't put it out there until it's exactly the way it should be, because, you know, you'll find out the hard way.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I keep going back to these. I've seen at some of these fairs, self-published books with typos on the cover, and I want to say something, but then I don't, because I know that they've spent a lot of money to have these printed. And I don't want to make them sad, but we all need to pay attention and advocate for ourselves. And that also means doing the work before we get it into print.
There's a question. I feel like
I think, shall we
Yeah,
get
that's
to the
important.
questions?
this one says, do most small presses charge for editing, but not for the publishing part? And the answer is no charge for either, or charge for editing and cover design and want that control. I'm going to back off. I'm going to let you guys say, but that was we've been talking about that, so I'll let you
No
guys.
way. Yeah. Joe?
No, I was just going to say, the thing that I've heard, I haven't experienced it myself, but I have heard of people working for small or university presses who ended up kind of having to hire they're working with an acquisitions editor who's walking them through things, but the proofing of the book, which they'll do on the end, like that final cleanup, they'll do that. But if you want someone to edit it, you might be on the hook for that yourself. But it's not so much like they're saying to you, you have to pay us this to do that. It's more like, we can not do it, or you can pay for it, or, you know, or we'll just go through. So I have heard of that a couple of times, but not like, give us this money to do it. I haven't heard that.
I just want to say there is a hybrid model. I have seen this. I do know of presses that are a cross between self-publishing and a small press, and they will charge for some of the editing and some of the design work. But the key there is it affordable too? And is it, I mean, you don't want something that's usury, that they're taking advantage of you. And their reputation on the whole, does it look professional? What kind of services, what do you get for that.
Yeah, can I just chime in here on one thing about that thing about reputation that I think is kind of tricky? Because I study a press or a magazine for a while. I try to get a sense of it. How long has it been around? Who's it publishing? You look at book lists and get a real sense of that, and also who's the editor? What are they doing? But also talking to people. Maybe not even the authors who are there, but if you have a chance to get a sense of what do you know about this press? Wow, they publish 30 titles a year, but what does that really mean? Are those all pre-flighted out, like they had that list picked 3 years ago kind of thing, or what? So kind of what you're saying about that hybrid, that could work, but that question always about, is this a good home for your baby or for your kitten, or your this thing you made, and also are they does it feel proportional, like what the skin in the game, if you're going to put some in, does it feel that it's a fair share, or is it like, yeah, you really want to be famous, well, that kind of weird thing.
Yeah. So let's see, we've got some other questions. I'm going back up. I know we've got some in the Q&A box. So, and I know there's at least one that is in the chat that we'll go back to. So we did, but this is sort of relevant to what we're talking about. Is Medium a great place to start publishing chapters of a novel? Medium, I think, well, it's like self-publishing your own short stories.
Oh.
But how does anybody, what do you think?
I think it's hard because it's almost like a blog, and you won't be able to put it in most literary journals once it's published there. So I published most of my first stories in literary journals, submitting.
Yeah, I think it's a question of, do you want this to have another life off that, and if so, hold it back. Unless you have some kind of a connection and they're like, yeah, we want you to blog. I mean, in a way, that's kind of what Tim did, right? Mark pulled Tim in, and he was doing this project, and he would describe that much better than me. But I learned that early on too, that I had an article, it published in someone else's blog, and then I wanted to sell it. And then, and it ended up working out okay. But that was very early in the days of blogging. And now it's kind of like everybody throws everything up. So kind of that whole idea of keeping some of those things to yourself, or holding them back until you know exactly the life that you want that work to have is maybe my best advice.
You might think of submitting, instead of putting it on Medium, submitting them to journals. And that's, also how you find out whether the work has an audience. So we have another question. How do you know if you're a good fit with a particular small press?
I can add something to that. Oh, Alan, go for it.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'll be quick with this, but I mean, for one thing, and I hate being like that guy, but like, read as much as you can, small presses, if you get really interested in the press. I'm not just saying that because they're small press authors. Also, small press books are really rad, so you'll enjoy them. But you can learn a lot just from a webpage and seeing what people publish, just seeing from the summaries and some of the things that Romaine were talking about earlier. You can see the sort of themes that are out there. So this kind of dovetails to a question later, but something I really think is cool is going to SPD, small I'm getting it, small
press distributor.
Small press distribution. And you can go in like numerical to alphabetic order of like every small press out there. Just go and visit their websites and enjoy the research of it. Don't think it's work, just have fun.
Yeah, totally.
Learning about all these different publishers, look at all the books they published, look at their summaries, look at the care and attention they give on their website to the books, and see what they put out there and see if those books sound like your book could hang out with them.
I like that.
You got to start somewhere, right? So I mean, that seems like a fair way to go about it.
I like that.
Another way might be to look at some books that you own or that you can check out from the library that are similar to your book.
Oh yeah, libraries.
And just see who published them. Yeah, libraries are great. It's and look at their mission statements, look at, you also should look at hard copies of the books too, before you sign on with them. So you know what their quality is like. Yeah, I mean, we could all tell horror stories, but I know somebody who won a major prize and it was wonderful, but the production quality of the book was very, very poor.
Mm.
And I mean, it's nice that there was a nice monetary award with it, but it's not a wonderful looking book, and that matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a couple more questions. These are actually kind of tied together, and it's around copyright. Like, does the author maintain copyright with a small press? And what happens if the small press folds?
Yes.
Depends on your contract.
Yeah. You have to read the contract. But I think a press that asks for copyright, you should not sign with. You never want to sign away all your rights, if you can avoid it.
You can give a non-exclusive right, and then that can lapse after like 2 years, for example, is my contract with Los Nietos. I'm going to be pretty transparent here. I knew I didn't want to sign away my rights, but I was willing to do a non-exclusive right for 2 years. And then at 2 years, I can cancel any right they have to publish my stories. That's a pretty good contract.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Mark, I mean, he's the best because somewhere you keep everything on,
Yeah.
at least on Bamboo Dart. You
Yeah.
keep all your rights.
Yeah, I think you'd need to, those are things you have to investigate in the process of finding a home for your book. And, you know, the question is legitimate. What happens if your small press folds? I do know of people whose presses have folded and that they've had to find somebody else to bring the book back into print. But I think the short answer to that is the copyright reverts to you, right? Am I, so.
It depends if they have a subsidiary, right? But I have a professor, he's trying to get his rights back on his press that folded. And this is a wonderful memoir about New York in the 70s. And this is a very well-established writer that is trying to get his rights back for his beautiful memoir. I mean, it's a tragedy. He's going to try to republish it, but he needs to figure out how he gets his rights back because the press is out of print. It's out of print and the press is gone.
And I think the interesting thing here too is that there's an interesting question that any person who wants to do a book could ask, because I think all of us here are in a print on demand environment. And which means that the publisher is printing, you know, they may be printing 20 or 30 copies, but they're basically kind of printing it as it is ordered. And so that's a little bit different than a traditional press, even a small press that might do a traditional run of 2,000, 2,500 copies of a book, and then they exist in the world, and then they're nibbled at and bought, and then maybe they do a reprint of it if they sell out. But that's a trickier thing too, because, you know, Mark and I had this conversation early on because it was like, okay, so we have a kind of clock on the time where he is going to be printing the book, right? And so that question of for print on demand, even if the press is going, you know, that's a whole different question. Like, it's a great advantage, but it's also, it's different, you know, than a big pile of books and people buy them, and you could be in print forever, but if no one's pressing order,
Right.
you know,
It's you're just sitting collecting dust. Yeah.
or not able to get another copy of it. You know?
Gotcha. Yeah.
So
And then getting them in stores when
That's
you're print on demand is harder.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And libraries as well.
Yeah.
So, and I feel, you know, lucky that I'm kind of on both sides of the equation, something we haven't talked about, but that with Inlandia, I'm also a publisher. And that's informs my question at the very beginning about what's the difference between self-published and small press, because when we first were publishing our very first book, there's really no, I didn't know what I was doing. It was just, I want to do this and this is what we're going to do. And you're feeling your way through it. But we've always been print on demand. But most, and this is a longer conversation too, but Lightning Source is our print model, and they are distributed through Ingram, and Ingram distributes around the world. So I think, it matters too with the press who their distributor is.
Right. Yes.
And I know that Ingram has, they have booklets and they get shunted out to libraries, so libraries can pick books from there, and bookstores. So, those are questions you want to ask of the press if they don't just tell you. So another question is about editors. Where do you find an editor? All kinds, like line editors, sensitivity editors. If you have to hire an editor, how do you find one?
That's a good question.
Have any of you used a contract editor?
No.
No.
So I can say with Inlandia that we have contracted out some editing jobs, and those are books that we felt very strongly needed to be in the world, but that I didn't feel comfortable editing myself because maybe they're outside of my knowledge base. You might try, looking at Poets and Writers first. They've got classified listings. You could look there. I imagine there are some editors in there.
AWP probably will have,
Yeah.
yeah.
Would-
AWP.
AWP, yeah.
They're also like in the back of Poets and Writers magazine, and in the back, the classifieds, people are often advertising their willingness to edit, to line edit, sensitivity edit. I would say sensitivity edit sometimes is like a trusted, aware reader. And you might work out a deal. I have hired, and I have been hired before, to be like, for $200, here's what I need you to look at. I'm going to give you this entire manuscript, 300 pages or whatever. Can you please check for these things? Let me know your reaction to X, Y, Z. And it's a pretty straightforward project-based type of thing. But if it's a shorter manuscript, just having somebody that you trust take a look, if it's sensitive material or whatever it might be. But that seems to be a little different from a structural edit, or something like that. But again, yeah, the backs of those publications, they have stuff. And then I'm also thinking about binders. There's a bunch of binders groups. If you're a woman or writer of color, there's binders groups on Facebook where people will post, I'm looking for this, anybody up for that? Or do you know how to find? And people share info there too.
Yes.
So finding your community and then networking within your community to find somebody. And if you are on Facebook, those binders groups are wonderful. And I've put out calls there for things. And in fact, I would suggest looking there and just asking, if they know of anybody. And I know we're coming up on time, but we have a few more questions. So maybe we can just try and power through these. This question is about guerrilla tactics in bookstores. So what are your guerrilla tactics addressed to Juanita?
I cold call bookstores, I email bookstores. I've been much more successful locally, I have to say. I was trying to do this Portland, Seattle thing, and I had no success. But once I started focusing just on LA and Inland Empire and emailing Barnes and Noble, because if you go on, this is a hint, if you go on their Instagram page and you go to the Instagram for that location, it will have the email of the person in charge of digital marketing. And that person will put you in touch for the events coordinator. And that's all you need. And they're so supportive. I have to say, you have to be careful on how many books they order. If they over order, they can send them back, or you can do them just on consignment, which is the safer way if you want to bring your own books, and then they pay you your part, but these last 2 ones I've done, I sold 15 at one, 14 at the other, and I was 10 books. The guy in Palm Desert ordered too many, ordered 25, but I think they're going to keep them and hopefully let me sign them and try to sell them. So I mean, that's one way. You can also go to small bookstores, ask them if they'll carry your book. I went to an art gallery in Palm Springs. That's a record store, kind of punk rocky, and the lady was like, sure, bring as many books as you want. I'm going to give you all of it. Whatever you bring in, I'll Venmo you.
Cool. Yeah.
So there are 3 sort of related questions from one person that maybe we can just tackle all in one question. Is a biography or an autobiography style book something that's smart to have published with a small press? And what would you tell your beginning writer self? And what is like the biggest mistake you'd want to avoid with, publishing?
My first book was a memoir autobiography. And yeah, I would totally encourage people to do that. I always think people all have their individual stories to share that nobody else has with them. So I would definitely encourage them. And I also think whatever you write is somehow rooted in biography and your own self-experience.
Yeah. I would say, in terms of where to look, think about what market, who's your audience with that autobiography or that memoir, and see if you can find a press that is sort of in alignment with that. I mean, if it's about parenting, find a press that likes books about parenting or health or history. It comes down to doing your homework. And I think that's kind of the same advice I would give my beginning writer self is do my homework before signing on the dotted line or making any decision. Any other advice?
I think we've hit it. I think you guys did a great job of addressing.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, we're basically at time. The last 2, where can I find a literary attorney? That would be an intellectual property lawyer. So you could start with the Bar Association in your city and just ask them if they can refer you to, unless somebody has a better answer.
I think there's free ones, right? Do you guys know, Romaine?
No.
I think that there's a National Writers Association, maybe it's local, that they'll put you in touch with an attorney at times. I need to research that issue myself, though. I don't really know. Do you know, Joe?
No, I mean, that sounds like a good place to start. And it depends on what you're looking for. Like, I mean, if you're getting ready to write a book, it's probably not the first thing you need to do. So you have some time to figure it out. But yeah, I think that, what was the first suggestion? The
Bar
Bar
Association.
Association.
Oh, yeah, Bar Association. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Another one that I'm thinking of is just the Californian Attorneys for the Arts, right?
That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah, exactly.
I didn't think of that right away. But.
I don't know why I'm writing this down, just so I'll have it. I'm learning so much from our conversation. There's been quite a few things that have been said. I'm like, oh, I have my little notes. So I'm taking notes as everybody's sharing things. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, we're over time. The last question I think would take another seminar, but how do you pitch your book to a small press? So maybe, we can think about that for next time. But I really want to say thank you to all of our panelists, and
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
Yes.
Thank you, Katie.
Thanks, Katie.
Yeah.
And thank you to our audience. I hope you got a lot out of it. This will go up on YouTube. And if you have questions after the fact and you want to shoot me an email, you're welcome to. I'll put my email in the chat, and that way. And I am all about trying to get answers for people and try and be that person that I didn't have when I was a new writer. So,
Yeah, that's,
all right.
yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
So
Well,
thank you.
All right. So have everybody keep writing and have a good rest of your night.
Good
Bye,
night.
everybody.
Bye-bye.